Well, good afternoon and welcome to our 30-minute webinar with Mrs. Nicole Nolan. I think this is a great topic. I'm really anxious to hear about how Nicole does mastery learning in her classroom. I think as teachers, we always are striving for mastery learning, but we wonder how everybody achieves it and how do they do that. And so I'm anxious to hear how Nicole is doing it, and I'm going to allow Nicole to introduce herself. And for those of you that are participating in this, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And at the end of the webinar, we'll have Nicole take those questions that are asked.
Very good. Thank you so much, Dr. Ogden, for inviting me to do this. I am super excited to be here with everyone. Mastery learning is something that is super important to me and kind of dear and near to my heart. And so this is me. You can see my socials up there. I am a 5th grade teacher this year, but I also teach 6th grade online in the mornings. And so I am well used to kind of navigating the chat boxes and things like that while I am presenting. And I first looked at mastery learning, really kind of, it was my COVID project. So it was something that I wanted to do. And then COVID happened, and it really gave me an opportunity to kind of dive into what this could look like in my classroom. And I have used mastery learning the way that my approach to it in 6th grade and 5th grade. And then I have helped 3rd and 4th grade teachers do this. And it really kind of started with me reading a book called Teach Better by Chad O. And he has a much longer name, and it ends with SKI, but it's really difficult for me to pronounce. So Chad Ostrowski, which is a horrible butchering of it. But if you look up Teach Better, it's white with green. That's really what got me kind of started on this journey. And so in that, I have joined some social media groups on that, and I have seen where this has worked all the way down to kindergarten. And I'm super happy to come along anyone that wants to dive deeper into this and help them kind of plan out and look like, what could this be in your classroom? So I started with this idea is, are you reaching your students where they need to be? And if you're anything like me, then the answer is probably no. And that's where I was. I felt like I was a pretty good teacher at kind of helping my low kids and my middle of the road kids, but I had no idea what to do with my kids that already knew what they were doing. And so I also knew that a lot of the time I was just teaching to the middle and really kind of following my pacing guide, which is important, and we need to do that. But I knew that there could be more. I knew that I could create experiences and moments that were tailored to my students, and that was really what I was called to do and what I needed to do as I changed things up. And so when we're thinking about mastery learning, and when I started to look at that, I focused on okay, where did this idea come from? Is it something that if I'm questioned about it from my principal, that I'm going to be able to, give rationale to? And Benjamin Bloom, who most of us know from Bloom's taxonomy, is known as the father of mastery learning. And he looked at that standard bell curve, and he researched ways to make that right side shift. And what he found was the most powerful way was to have one-on-one tutoring. And so I'm sure he went to the powers that be, and he said, there's a couple of things I'd really like. I'd like a unicorn, and I'd like to have, more teachers in the classroom so that we can do one-on-one tutoring. And they said, what color unicorn do you want? So knowing that one-on-one tutoring isn't feasible in school environments, he created mastery learning to get similar results. And so how I kind of begin this is I look at what my standards are, and then I begin to kind of chart a course. Now, I am looking at mastery learning in the context of this webinar in kind of a micro slice of this. I am happy to chat with anyone to let you know I have done this for entire units. But that takes a lot of work and diving in. Basically, what you're doing is you're taking what I'm going to talk about here in this course and multiplying it by however many standards you teach within that unit. So standards are the place that I begin when I am taking small movements towards building up my mastery learning. So in 5th grade, we teach ecology. So this is the standard that I've got here. The standard I have is one that says that we're going to use models to describe the energy and animals' food that is used for body repair, growth and motion, maintain body warmth, things that were once from the sun. And so when you begin to break this down, you want to take your standard and you want to break it down into 3 buckets, if you will. And so I start from the standard and I say, okay, I need to build this down into what are my 3 depth of knowledge buckets. And the main idea here is that there are 3 different levels and 3 different pieces that you're breaking your standard to, increasing to more complex ideas as you move from your developing group to your extending group. Now you notice that I don't have Bloom's taxonomy here on the screen, and don't tell Benjamin that. But I really like Webb's depth of knowledge better when I am planning out my my mastery learning targets. I think it's just a cleaner way of looking at it. Bloom's taxonomy just tends to get a little overwhelming for me. And then I get lost in the verbs. And really, where I want to focus on is that focus section of Webb's. Now, most of the standards that I teach are a depth of knowledge level 2. And so if you have a learning target that is a level 3, then you would need to shift your developing and progressing and extending model to encompass that and to get to that extended thinking. And so it's important to go back and to look at your standard and determine what depth of knowledge are you really being asked to teach to. And that is sometimes something that when I work with teachers, I find that we struggle with, is we tend to teach mastery to a level that we've not been asked to take kids to yet. And then we get frustrated because they aren't at this level that we perceive that they need to be. And really it's because that's probably not appropriate for the level that they need to be at. And so I always try to start with my standards to remind myself, this is the work that I need to do. And that extending level really is that moment for kids that have come in with an understanding or that just needed a few holes in their thinking to shine at. And so you can see I have kind of my star there at depth of level 2. That's my on standard level for that. So developing, those are our recall, that's our prerequisite knowledge. What did they need to know prior to coming into me to be able to make sense of this standard? Okay. It's really easy for me in math to look at that because I know to do 2-digit, by 2-digit multiplication, you need to be able to do 2-digit by 1-digit multiplication, and you need to know your multiplication facts. And so if you don't know your multiplication facts, then you're probably not going to be successful at 2-digit by 2-digit multiplication. And so that's my depth of knowledge 1. In science and social studies, I'm looking more at content. I'm looking more at vocabulary for things like that. So I kind of place them out. I look at my depth of knowledge, and then I start to begin to focus on what really does Webb talk about in that focus area. So when I'm thinking about depth of knowledge, I tend to think of it in a mountain analogy. At the base of the mountain is all of our DOK1 tasks. These are your recall, your identification, your labeling tasks. and they are the foundation for all other tasks. And I think sometimes DOK1 gets a bad rap because they're not the flashy tasks. They're not the moments where you're like, that's the part when I want my, principal to come in and observe me, is my students labeling the parts of the flower. But if our students don't have that strong foundation, then they're never going to be able to climb that mountain successfully. What's going to happen is they're going to have a Sherpa, which is probably you, carrying them up that mountain. Okay. And I have been that Sherpa for my students that didn't have that depth of knowledge, understanding, and needed to have so much scaffolding that sometimes I went home exhausted, wondering who did the most work today. And so it's important for you to identify what those DOK1 levels are. It's also important to remember the distinction between DOK levels is the cognitive challenge that the task will present. And so as we're looking at that, just because you created a picture and labeled it, doesn't mean you've done a DOK4. When we are DOK4ing, we are using some extended thinking. We are applying concepts. And I think sometimes we get stuck with those verbs, create. I'll have them create a picture, and that will give me a DOK4. Well, if they're creating a DOK picture so that they can label the details in your DOK picture, then it's really a DOK1 that has an artistic slant to it, which is great because we need to give ourselves an opportunity for our students to have those moments to use their passion, whether it's writing or artistic ability or creating multimedia presentations. But it's important to always, for me, for Mastery Learning, to go back and look at what are my verbs? What is it that I'm asking students to do? And is it matching where I think I'm going to be? And that's why I like to focus on that focus. And you can just, Google Webb's DOK. You'll probably come up with this image. It is by Tracy Watanabe, is the image that I use. And it's just like, for me, a very clean image. I have it laminated and printed in my planning folder for that. But coming back to, I have my standard, and I've got kind of my 3 buckets. I know that I'm at 2, so I need to get my kids to 2, which means we need to start at 1. And I need to have a plan for those kids that are going to be at a level 3. So when I look at my learning intention there, it says students who demonstrate understanding can use models to describe that energy in animals' food used for body repair, growth, motion, and to maintain warmth was once energy from the sun. That is a lot of words to say food web. Okay, that's what the standard is. We are looking at food webs. They need to understand how energy moves and why energy is lost throughout the food web, where the energy comes from. And so I need to break that down into my different depths of knowledge. So I want you to notice something very important with my extending target here. This is not the standard. My extending DOK3 for this says investigate the impact a disruption in the model has on the components of the food web. That is nowhere in PS 3.1. And that's because the extending area is a working beyond. And so this is pushing beyond what contents the standard might be. If you're not sure where to find, your DOK kind of learning intentions for that, look at the next grade level up. What do they need to do this in the next topic? Maybe if you're looking at a curriculum or a subject that is progressive and spiral, or the next grade level. And so sometimes it's my DOK3 has nothing to do with DOK2, but it's the prerequisite for the next thing coming up. So 1 is always what do they need to know to get to 2. 2 is exactly what I need to teach. And 3 is what do I do? It answers that PLC question number 4. What do I do once they already know it? And again, I put here my little starburst so that I can remember this is where I need to go. So to be honest, I really like DOK 3. And that's where I want to take kids because I'm passionate about that. But I can't lose sight of what I've been asked to do and what I've been tasked to do by the standard is get them here. Now we're getting to probably one of my favorite topics, and that is formative assessment. And so there's so many ways that you can make formative assessment work really well for you and your students. And I have found that when I do formative assessment well, it transforms my classroom. Now you might be saying, well, Nicole, hold on. We started with standards. We know what we're teaching. But we haven't taught them anything yet. And that's true. So I very much believe in the power of backwards design. And the first step in mastery learning is creating mastery questions. Okay, just like if I were in a boat, if I were setting sail, if I don't know where I am going, I will never get there. I don't know about you, but I am directionally challenged. Now, I grew up in Michigan, and I could always figure out where I was in Michigan because I could always somehow figure out where the lake was. And in Michigan, you have a map right there on your hand. And so you can always just look at your hand and be like, oh, okay, that's the way I need to go. Moved on to Missouri, I have no idea which way I'm facing right now. Okay, so I know that if I don't know where I'm heading, I will never, ever find my way. That's the same with mastery learning. Once we look at our targets, mastery questions become very easy. We look at our targets, we create questions, and we say, how am I going to find out if my students understand it, have mastered the content? As we move up the levels, the learning is more complex, and there should be fewer questions, and they should take longer time for the students to kind of understand them. So let's look at some examples. So here I have my identify the components. That's my DOK level 1. That's my developing group. They have 3 questions that they have to be able to do to prove to me that they're ready to go on to level 2. And you can see that they are very low level. Circle the source of energy in the food web. Identify the producers and consumers. DOK level 2, I've got 2 questions, and they're which and why questions. Okay, they're becoming a little bit more complex for the students. And then my DOK level 3, because I still want to hold them accountable, I still want them to know that the learning that they're doing is important, is what will be the effect if one, so the kind of that cause and effect piece. I stack them that way so that there's a lot of low level questions, a fewer middle level questions, 1 higher, because it does help kind of even out when my students are working through their personal plan on how long it will take. And I want to make sure that they have that good foundation. Okay, so I want to give my DOK level 1 multiple opportunities to kind of show me that they understand those foundational skills. Once I know my standard, once I have broken down my buckets, once I have created my assessment, now it is time for me to create some engaging learning opportunities around that. When I am creating a mastery learning plan, I do it in a grid format. And so students move almost like a game board is what I've used in the past. Canva is great for that. You can just Google in Canva game boards and they will have one for you. And students just kind of move. I've made little tokens and we put it up on our whiteboard that's magnetized, and they just move their little token all the way around the game board. And they enter in on the game board in different places. And that's a culture that we've built in our classrooms. That's definitely something you would want to have a conversation with your students about, is what this is going to look like. This is not a game where everyone needs to get to the end. It's a game where everyone needs to get to that star, that DOK level 2 with the example of this, this standard. When I'm then looking at my learning opportunities, what am I going to do for my DOK level 1 students? What am I going to do for my DOK 2s, my DOK 3s? Use your resources. Okay, if you've got a good curricular resource, look to see what it has that fits. I love the teacher sidebar of a textbook resource, if you happen to have one of those, to help develop supporting and extension activities. I often look at the supports for ELL to see if there's something in vocabulary that would be helpful for me in DOK1. This is an opportunity for you to give variety. You've got partner work, independent work, some whole group experiences. Even our DOK3s still should be invited to our whole group Tier 1 teaching. And then you want to make sure that you're giving balance. Learning should not be a punishment. And so the developing group should not just be working on flashcards while the extension group is making a mini movie. And so I want my opportunities for my developing group to be just as engaging. Otherwise, you will never get buy-in for this. If your DOK1 kids look over and they see that, you know, those DOK3 kids are getting to do something amazing and fun, and they're getting to do packets of doom, they're just going to stop. And so it's really important to make sure that you've got a balance of activities for everyone. These are some of my favorites. Now, we won't have time to go through all of them, but I did kind of want to highlight a few of my favorite pieces. So I love a Fast and Curious. Fast and Curious is an Edu protocol. I mean, if you Google up Edu protocol, and I will get a link for you in the chat box for the Fast and Curious Edu protocol. But it is taking any type of DOK level 1 tasks. So we're looking at identifying, we're looking at definitions, putting it into some type of quiz type format game. So that's your Kahoots, your quizzes, your Quizlets, your Gimkits, your Bookits, whichever it is your favorite, doing that. And the goal of Fast and Curious is you present it to your students, everyone gets in, they take the quiz, and they record their score. And then you go over the questions that were most missed. Now, my favorite tool for Fast and Curious is Quizizz, Quizizz. And I love it for a couple of reasons. The first reason that I loved Quizizz for is their reporting feature is by far the best that I have found in any quiz type game, and I have paid for them all. When you are taking a Quizizz type game and you are done, it color codes. Red, we need to really look at these. Orange, kind of, these are not our best ones. And then green, good, yes, we got those. And so as a teacher, when I'm done with that recording piece, I can pull it up and I can see what questions do we need to go over? What 3 vocabulary words gave us the most trouble? I also love that Quizizz allows students to have a randomly generated name. I get their real name on my piece, but when I'm showing up that reporting, it's like Penelope Pincushion or something like that, you know, Robert Rutabaga. And so it protects the identity of everyone in the classroom. What I love even now with Quizizz is Quizizz has merged with AI. And I can just tell Quizizz, I need vocabulary on these 8 words, and then Quizizz will create the vocabulary quiz for me. And I can look at it and I can say, you know, I don't like this question. Can you give me this question in a real world scenario? You can do some really quick and easy customization to it, and it's ready to go. So once you've taken your first quiz, you write down your personal score. So my personal score. And then the teacher gives that, you know, kind of 3 minutes of let's review those questions. And then you take the quiz again. And all you are trying to do is beat your score. And then as a collective, we're working on, can we meet a collective score? Now, in my classroom, that's 85%. So that's what my district has decided is considered meeting our expectations. And so once as a class, our class goal is 85%. As a teacher, I've got a pretty good idea that most of us know what we're talking about. And so this Fast and Curious is very fast. Okay, you take the quiz, you get a little learning, take your quiz again, you go on with your day. The next day, you do it again. I go over the 3 words that we, you know, struggled with the most from the second time we took the quiz. We take the quiz, you know, we get our score, we go over 3 words, we take the quiz again, we hold it until the next day until we get 85%, and then we're done. And it buys back time in my class. I also love Edpuzzle. Edpuzzle is great for quick videos that are embedded with questions, a lot like the Safe School videos that we have to take at the beginning of the year where you can't fast forward through. But Edpuzzle goes up, and if you click on Edpuzzle Originals, those are Edpuzzles that are created by Edpuzzle's teacher creator content. And so I don't have to worry about, you know, anything that might be inappropriate. The questions are already in there. And those are great tools to have kids do some of their learning opportunities with. And so I want to kind of include different things, task cards, tic-tac-toe choice boards. It doesn't have to be just one piece of learning per intention or learning target. You can give students some voice and choice. Now, how this looks in my classroom is I have got kids, like I said, working in all different parts of the day, which can seem a little bit maddening. And so you need to have some type of a triage system in place. I use solo cups, and you can buy solo cups in other colors other than red, but you will need red solo cups if you decide to use the solo cup method. You'll also need green solo cups and yellow solo cups. And what I do is I give every table or group or student a set of 3 solo cups. Green solo cup is on top, then the yellow, and then the red. And what they do is they move those solo cups as they need support. So if I look out and all my solo cups are green, I have a moment to drink some hot coffee because everyone is able to be working. Once I see that yellow solo cup, I know that someone has a question, but they can continue working. Red solo cup, mayday, mayday, they cannot move on. And there's a great way for this to happen where I've got people working in different activities all the time that I'm able to manage that. Now, you need to also know that I am not doing this mastery learning unit kind of protocol all the time in my classroom. There are times when everyone just sits and I need to give my information. But when we get to a target that I feel like this is an area where we're going to have some opportunity for some movement, some opportunity where we might need to take a step back or a pause, change kind of the plan that we have, I will bring out this full end system of that. So that is really kind of how I approach this in my classroom. There are my socials on again, but I did want to give some time if there were any questions here, anyone that was on that would like to get some more information. I do have a link to my presentation. There's also a worksheet that kind of takes you through the bucketing system that I use, if that would be helpful. And those will be posted in the mini course that's going to be created on Mastery Learning through Teachable.
Well, thank you, Nicole. This was really informative, and I think it was a great breakdown to help teachers know how to implement this and how to set it up within their classroom. Within 7 to 10 business days, we'll have this webinar up on our website so that people can view it. And then we'll be working to get this into a mini course that will be available for people that are wanting to get 0.5 hours of PD, perhaps for Career Ladder. So thank you, Nicole. Again, it was great having you, great content. And thanks everybody for your participation in this webinar.
Thank you so much.